I think we can start. So
All right.
let me,
Go ahead. Sorry.
let me kick this off, this user group. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sitecore user group Jaipur. And this time we have two very known faces of Sitecore community with us to present with their topic, Akshay, Sura, and Kamruz, Jaman. Both are Sitecore MVPs and partners and having a great experience in Sitecore. So without taking much time, I'm going to hand over this session to them, and I think we can start the session. Over to you.
Awesome. Let me see. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. We love presenting, so this is a good topic. So the topic today is Sitecore XM Cloud really the future of Sitecore? My name is Akshay Sura, and with me I have the ever handsome Kamruz Jaman. All right, so let's kick it off, right? So what is XM Cloud? So Sitecore released XM Cloud recently. XM Cloud is a cloud native CMS, completely hosted and managed for you. So there's no hosting or anything you need to worry about. They're saying that you'd get the same amazing visual authoring experience that you do with the current product that they have. Gives you a lot more agility in terms of giving your marketing and development teams to push out product much faster. It is composable, it is headless, so it's much, much different than what we're used to as a Sitecore XMXP. So XM Cloud is not equal to Sitecore XP or XM.
So we could take a look at what XM Cloud does include. So it's not just Sitecore XM, it's a set of features, and it's all been nicely packaged up for us in the cloud and into the SaaS world. So actually, I mentioned we do get this really nice content authoring experience. You do still have the ability to get that same experience that you currently do with Experience Editor. So this is a bit different in the headless world. So if anybody has used other headless products, that you do not usually find a content authoring experience. There is a unified identity. I know Sitecore's obviously, we're all probably used to having single sign-on. In the composable world, you work with lots of different products, and each of them have their own sign-on, right? So it's nice that Sitecore has consolidated all of their products under a single unified identity, as you'd kind of expect from when you're offering a suite of products. The Sitecore portal is essentially a landing page for all your different Sitecore products. Again, this just nicely consolidates all of the offerings that you may have purchased from Sitecore into an easy to manage portal. And then you get the XM Cloud environments themselves. You get a CM instance, as you'd expect. It's similar to your XM instances on-prem or on your local environments. You have the content editor, you have the experience editor, you have an edge tenant, which if any of you have been using Experience Manager with Experience Edge, this will give you publishing to global CDN target on the edge, obviously, so that will give you really, really fast content delivery effectively. And there's no content delivery nodes as such. It is using the Experience Edge tenants. Pages is a new application, so that ties in with the content authoring experience. It is a brand new SaaS-based content authoring experience. Again, we've only seen demos of it, but it is the next generation editor. It's an evolution built on top of Horizon. Within the XM Cloud environments themselves, you obviously would normally have a production environment, but you could also host all of your lower environments, such as pre-prod, UAT, even dev environments. The dashboard, as we'd expect, you don't need a launchpad type thing. There'll be various dashboards built in to get to the different products, to get to your different environments. And there is also a bunch of deployment tools, which is really, really neat. So you can connect up your repositories, and they will handle all the build and the deployment services into various applications, into various endpoints. It's also important just to give a quick definition of composable DXP. I know we mention it a lot, and we take it for granted that everybody knows what it is. But composable DXP is where you have different systems for your different needs. So you might have a system for your content. You might have another system to provide the search. You may have another system for commerce. You may have yet another system for personalization, and then you might have a bunch of its separate integrations. They're usually cloud-based. They're usually SaaS. And now, in order to build your digital experience platform, you need to now compose all of these separate and different systems into one coherent package and solution that works for your projects and for your customers.
And then we wanted to also quickly go over monolith as opposed to headless CMS. So we've all been working in a very monolith-based system. So our traditional Sitecore XM XP are monolith in the sense everything is bundled into one software, and you pretty much try to find any solution you can based on the features available there. But in this case, what we want to showcase is the backend in terms of the templates you use, the data you store, and the front end are very tightly coupled in the sense the layouts, the renderings. We know how this page is going to look. We use the SDK. The SDK is very closely attached to the monolith itself. So the layout, the visual way of how the data gets represented, we know that already. When it comes to headless CMS, which is what XM Cloud is, you have the backend still, so you can have your templates the same exact way as you did before, template inheritance, storing the data, segregating the templates, all of that, you can absolutely do so. Its job is also to provide everything via an API. In this case, it's the Experience Edge. You get it on the edge. You can query the GraphQL, get the information you need. But from a implementation perspective of the front end, technically, it doesn't need to know. A headless CMS is only responsible for the content you store and how it delivers it. You can use whatever front-end technology you want, whether it's a mobile phone, a POS system, Next.js, Angular, it doesn't really matter. You take care of that and you build it based on what you need. And technically, the headless CMS doesn't need to know how the data gets represented in a visual format because it's omnichannel. We wanted to go over a couple of things of what XM Cloud is not. So it is not a monolith. So it is not XM. It's not Sitecore XM. It's not Sitecore XP. It's completely different. Like Kamruz mentioned, XM Cloud is a combination of multiple services which make up XM Cloud. It's fully managed. So it is not a platform in the sense where you could just install it on your own machine or another instance. If you have like an on-prem, from an implementation perspective or deployment perspective, you could, when you're getting the instance from Sitecore, ask for different regions of where it could be deployed to, but they manage everything. We don't touch it. It's not 100% customizable in the way we are used to it. We are used to taking a Sitecore instance, customizing everything from the way the layout pipeline, HTTP pipeline, God knows what pipelines and fields and God knows everything. From a customization perspective, this is a service. You need to treat it as a service. Sitecore is letting you customize it, but just because they're letting you customize it, you shouldn't customize it the traditional way we're used to. I think we have a slide upcoming which talks a little bit more to that. we do think it's a step in the right direction. There's a lot of things which Sitecore has done in the past, which give it the necessary tools it needs to get to this composability. So composable DXP is something they're trying to get to with all the acquisitions they've made. And I think they're going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Sitecore has been taking these smaller steps, right, to get to exactly where we are. So it feels like if you've been keeping up to date and we're at least reading about all the different tech things that they've been releasing, you really start to realize that actually this is actually quite evolutionary rather than being completely big bang revolutionary, right? I mean, obviously it does depend on what your current installations and customizations and things like that are. But the other thing is, of course, when you're doing migrations, you need to think about, we're not just thinking about migration or technical stuff, right? We also got to think about the content authoring and things like that. So if we have a look at where we started, right? So Sitecore launched in 2001 originally, the original 0.1 version. I started working with Sitecore on version 6. That was released around 2008. Luckily, there'd been some major overhauls, so we are familiar with, the content editor, the page editor. In 6.2, there was some nice page editor improvements, so you could start to use page editor with data sources much better. 6.4, I think, was when they started to do things like personalization and things as well. But 8.2 was released in 2016. That then introduced the experience editor, again, just built on improvements on top of the page editor. We introduced Azure PaaS, so we can now go into the cloud more easily. And then SXA version 1. Although SXA version 1, SXA had been around as from a company called Cognified as Zengarden. So SXA 1.1 didn't just pop out; it was an evolution of Cognified's Zengarden. But Sitecore brought it in, rewrote it, followed in with Helix patterns and tighter integrations. You're on mute, actually.
In 2017, they launched the managed cloud. So they are, and again, an evolution on top of Azure PaaS, where they had a vendor who would take care of hosting all your instances, dealing with all the support tickets, SLAs. So that was their getting into the more of a service format, if you want to look at it that way. 2018 was the JSS tech preview. So, as you know, JSS is a GitHub repo. You can go check all of these. But JSS is the first time they entered into more of a headless thinking of how to deliver content in a headless way. Same time, Identity Server was also introduced. So before it was ASP.NET membership. Now we talked about Identity Server. It was open source at that moment in time. Let us customize with other providers, do a little bit more of a complicated workflow in terms of authorization. And then 2019, Sitecore Horizon. I think they announced Horizon and Zenith. I don't know what happened to Zenith, but Horizon was this next generation page editor or experience editor, which was supposed to revolutionize how we build pages. So they got into that. And then in 2020, Sitecore containers officially were taken over or supported by Sitecore. Previously, we did use Docker, we did use containers, but it was a community-led effort. But 2020 is when Sitecore officially started supporting it. And then Sitecore content serialization. So as you guys know, Unicorn and TDS have been around forever, as long as I have known Sitecore. But Sitecore interpreted those, came up with their own content serialization, called it Sitecore Content Serialization, launched in 2020. So they have a history of that. 2021 is when Experience Edge was released, primarily with Content Hub originally. After that, It was available for XM instances. Basically, Experience Edge is where when you publish, you no longer need a CD instance at all. So from the CM, you're publishing it to Experience Edge, which is basically CDN all over the world, where you're able to query your content using GraphQL. At first it was basic, but then they added a lot more query strength, so you could query in multiple different permutations, and it became the norm. And then the Next.js JSS SDK was released, so you could build JSS app pretty quickly. They would talk to the Experience Edge endpoint, get the layout details from on top of it. So what we're trying to show in this slide to you guys is that every single piece, which is very important from an XM Cloud perspective, if you go back, there is a history there in terms of where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back and take a look at what XM Cloud does include, and then we kind of push that back into what we just saw, we can see that XM Cloud will include SXA headless, which is up and coming. But again, SXA has been around for a long time. It's gone through a lot of iterations. They have a lot of experience with that. JSS, or more specifically, the headless piece here. Obviously, JSS was the first iteration built on top of the layout service. Again, evolutionary. It was launched as JSS with React, supported Angular. They had some Vue implementations. They've now included Next.js. Headless also, obviously, the layout service then got renamed to Headless Services because it wasn't just JSS. We're also talking about the .NET Core rendering host as well. So it's not just about JavaScript and React and Next.js. You can still build using .NET Core rendering host on XM Cloud. In terms of containers, XM Cloud is hosted and built in the cloud, built on top of AKS is our understanding. Again, they have this experience of running containers, both within locally within the community and within their own managed services. And as we said, in terms of development process as well. We just mentioned the Edge as well. This has been around for a while. It's very much fundamental to XM Cloud in order to get that massive scale and that geo distribution. It wouldn't be possible without the Edge connector and the Edge distribution. Cyclosynth serialization also quite fundamental. We know as part of their development process, as part of your development process, when you're working code, you're doing your check-ins, they will be using the cycle serialization format in order to push into XM Cloud. Probably more than likely using the IAR, the items as resource files format, which is released in cycle 10.1. But again, very much fundamentally built on top of cycle serialize. We also do know that XM Cloud comes with comes with cycle personalize, but a much more like cut down, a light version of cycle personalize, not the full version. Again, personalize is its own separate standalone product as well. So again, and obviously this was built on top of Boxever's personalized product. So there is a long history on that, and Cycle has now brought that into their fold and kept it as a separate standalone product, but also then gone down the composable route and integrated it into their own XM Cloud offering as well. So let's talk about a little bit about the development experience. So XM Cloud does have the option to develop using Docker containers. You won't have a local installation, so I can't download zip file. I can't download any WDPs and install it locally like we traditionally would have. There's just too much going on in order to make it really possible. And especially, and I'd say this is actually quite rare in the SaaS and the cloud world. So all of the other platforms that we have worked with, which are headless, which are SaaS, which are cloud, typically do not have this option to be able to do this. You have to take the second option, which is you are working directly against a cloud instance. So you'd have a dev instance, which is typically shared between your developers. You could obviously do mixed mode, like you could have some of the developers running on local containers who need to run local containers, and you could have a bunch of others who are just running directly against a cloud instance. And I think that's probably going to be where we end up, where maybe you end up with the front end team who are working directly against a cloud instance. And then you have the back end and the integrations team who need to go in and make some customizations, the odd bits of customizations and things like that, to some of the XM parts that you can customize. And they would use a Docker instance and then obviously check in the code, and that would run through their DevOps to the DevOps process. I think we're both in a bit of have a few mixed feelings about this one. We like the fact that you do have containers. It will be quite comforting for us moving from XP and XM because we're so used to those customizations. But on the other hand, it's a double-edged sword, because as soon as you start to make those customizations, that might now mean that you break your automatic upgrade path. So again, I think we'll have to see. I think we have to be very, very, very careful with it. We'll show you in the next couple of slides what we think is the correct way of doing it. So that's a local development. So what you typically do is you work on your local instance via Docker, via the cloud instance. You check your code into Git. Sitecores build and deploy services would then kick in, pick up your code, build the code, and then push that out into their XM Cloud instance. Since we had the Docker in the last instance, so what generally happened is you'd build your code, you would layer it in a custom Docker image, Sitecore would take that. Your image is built on XM Cloud, an XM Cloud image. You'd layer that on top. Site would then deploy that out. You then get access to that via your CM instance. When you are then, your content authors would go in, they would enter content, they would then hit publish. But there is no web databases in this particular case. There is no content delivery nodes. You would publish out all of your content to the experience edge. At the same time, you would obviously build a front end. If you're using something like Next.js or React or Angular, even one of those JavaScript-based frameworks, using something like Vercel, that could just pick it up from that same repo and then pull its content down from the experience edge. If you do need to make customizations, then in the headless and the composable world, you would typically do these using Azure Functions.
And then we wanted to talk a little bit about customizations, and this is very interesting to talk about because now the thing we have to keep in mind is this is a fully managed service. So the definition of a service is they maintain it. So from an upgrade perspective, fixes, security fixes, it's a service provider, Sitecore in this case, who's responsible for those upgrades. Now, we've said many times Sitecore's been really, really kind to let us do the customization. So in the sense, if you want to customize pipelines and have your custom configs, they're letting you do this, but it's discouraged is the best way I can put it. What they are going to let you do, though, is they are going to let you customize based on webhooks. So if something gets published, a webhook gets triggered, you can do something. If something happens, you can trigger a webhook and you can do something else outside in an Azure function, in a Lambda function, whichever serverless function you choose to. That is typically how it's done in a SaaS model in a service. That's what we are used to. So like all the headless providers we are used to, no one lets us customize the base service. And so in the last couple of years, when things got upgraded or modified, you get a notification saying, hey, by the way, we're rolling out this upgrade, and they'll let you know if there's any breaking change. But typically, if you didn't customize, you wouldn't have to worry about the breaking changes. So just be aware of that, in the fact that the more customizations you do, it actually adds more work on your plate. So start to think of, I think they had mentioned something like 10.3 would have these webhooks as part of it. So I think we need to switch our mentality more on how we customize, and then get out of the way we customize all the pipelines and fields and renderers, and get more into the webhook method.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with customizations, as soon as you start to move into the headless world, you start to move into the Jamstack world, particularly, right? The static site generation and the incremental site generation with Next.js, you start to think differently. So one of the basic customizations that a lot of us have made are the HTTP begin pipeline, right? We'll go in, we'll start to write a new custom item resolver where if the user's from here, then do this, or if it's this URL, then do that. When you start to go into that Jamstack world, you can't do that, right? There is no per user request. It's just the same request for everybody, and everybody gets the same response. So that's why you need to start thinking slightly differently and removing as many of those customizations as you can. If you do need to do something, you can write that in your code, right? Hey, I need to do something on this particular page. Well, it's going to be the same for everybody. If you need to do something else custom, then your custom stuff is usually a JavaScript call to an API endpoint to make the customization on that front end. Obviously, you get a little bit more fancy with the new edge workers and things like that. But at the basic, from the CM perspective, it's you should be removing as much of those customizations and thinking about it in a different way.
Do you want to talk about the semantic versions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was a interesting one. So the other thing to note is XM Cloud will have a new versioning, so it won't be XM Cloud 10.2 or 10.3, right? It would not follow the same versioning as what we get with XP and what we get with XM. They are very, very similar products, obviously, but they are not the same products. I think right now maybe they will follow the same development path for the core CMS functionality. But what we do know is XM Cloud will have its own set of versioning, and it will follow proper semantic versioning. So you'll have a major, a minor, and a patch number. So a 1.0.0 and a 1.0.1 and a 2.0.0 and a 2.1.0, for example, right? What we do know is anything within a major release will not be a breaking change, and it can be, and they will be able to upgrade the system automatically. So if you're on version 1 and they release a 1.0.1, that could be automatically upgraded. If they release a 1.1, that could be automatically upgraded. If they release a 1.9, that can also be automatically upgraded. As soon as they introduce a 2.0, there is potentially breaking changes. Now, if you have gone and made customizations to the CM instance, that means they cannot automatically upgrade your system. And more than likely, you'll need to go in and say, hey, I'm happy for you to just now flip this over. Now, if you haven't made any customizations, then guess what? It can just be automatically upgraded. There's nothing for you to do. And that's typically how all SaaS systems do work. The other thing, of course, is we have heard, don't make customizations unless you really, really, really need to make customizations, because at some point we will remove the ability for you to make those customizations. Webhooks and APIs are the future in this regard. If you use those webhooks and you use those APIs, you will not have any breaking changes.
Yep. And then finally, yeah, we do think in the Sitecore space, XM Cloud is the future of Sitecore. This is finally Sitecore seeing the value in composable based on the purchases they've done the last couple of years. It makes sense, and the biggest thing at this point, because they captured CDP, personalized, send, and Order Cloud, so everything else was taken care of from a CMS perspective. This was the best thing they could have done to go in the right direction, and I think they have. And we have to be a little bit patient in terms of when this will come out from a usability perspective, but I think they're trying to get this out there and get customers on there already. But I think from a partner perspective, we're still waiting on our instances for it.
Yeah, and it is an evolutionary journey. I know we're not all on that same evolutionary path. A lot of the projects even that I've been working on recently are just MVC. Some of them even still have some web forms components and parts to them, right? Believe it or not. But the journey has been there. I know not everybody is on that same step or on that same path, but for the base, like CMS, it's familiarity for the business, it's familiarity for the users, the experience editor and the way of creating pages and content and integrating it all is going to be very familiar for your content authors. You could take an XP or an XM instance and just package up the content and install it into XM. There's no reason you couldn't do that. If you're on JSS, if you're in Next.js particularly, and you've been using GraphQL, it will be a much easier and shorter jump than if you're on MVC or, God forbid, even web forms. So it is a future, but fortunately, I think Sitecore will be supporting their XM and XP on-prem or PaaS or containers or whatever you're using. They will be supporting that version for a while. So it's not like XM is out, everything else is getting abandoned. So we have a transition period for a lot of us.
Yeah, and with that, questions, because Q&A is the best part of all of this, because we get to answer all the questions and we learn a ton from Q&A. So no question is bad. Trust me, guys. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I'm actually also waiting for a few questions from the Fox, but I think right now we have very less number of people in this event, so didn't expected this, so no problem. But that was a very great session for us, and it was very helpful for all of us to know more about the Sitecore XM Cloud. And as I also recorded this session, and I'm going to publish this soon for all the Fox. So in case we have any questions, so we all are active on the community, so people can ask. And we also have a new Slack channel for the XM Cloud, and we can also put our question over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you so much for both of you guys to taking this session and help us to know more about the XM Cloud. Thanks once again.
All right, guys. Bye. Have a good night. Or
Yeah,
good
same
day.
to you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.